Fantastic. Thanks, Jess. Great. Cool. So before we get going, I just wanted to remind you all who we've got here from the FEA. So obviously, I think I know lots of you. I can see lots of familiar faces dropping in. I'm Tish. I lead the Innovation Award currently, but I am so delighted to have officially started at the FEA my wonderful colleague Sozik, who will be covering my maternity. So I'm off next week on maternity leave, my final 10 days. And Sozik's here and will be leading the award through your selection process and then the support for the 6 winners. And then we also have the wonderful Jess, who many of you have met at the booster, who led our booster. She's the comms and events manager for the award, and she will also be really supporting you throughout the selection process in terms of kind of the communications you're getting, and then the logistics through the panel. So you'll get to meet Sozik and Jess at those various points. C1, who many of you know also, is not here today, but she is our Director of Scale and Innovation, and again, another very wonderful pair of hands to support you through the selection process. So given that I'm off in a few days, just wanted to make sure you're aware who the awards team are and who the key people are that will be supporting you through. So quick housekeeper reminding stuff before we jump in. So it'd be great, as I mentioned, if you could keep your cameras on and ideally keep yourself on mute while I'm presenting. There'll be plenty of time for questions, and so you can come off mute and ask your question then, or if you'd prefer to use the chat, Jess and Sozik will really kindly be monitoring it and we'll make sure that will be shared with me. And then, as I mentioned, this is being recorded and we will share both the recording and the slides after the webinar. So let's get going. Great. So welcome to the first kind of online workshop looking at supporting you through the selection process. And there's 3 big things we want to cover today. The first is ensuring that you understand where the written application, the first stage of the process, fits in to the overall process, and some kind of key tips around how you can approach it. Then we'll do a deep dive into each of the criteria that the written application asks you to focus on before looking at an example, not a full written application, but we've picked the problem and the solution from a previous applicant, and we'll have a look at that together. There'll be quite a bit of me sharing and talking, but there'll be lots of opportunity for questions for you, and there'll also be some breakouts. So it'll be great if you are ready to participate and really live the FEA values of collaboration and get chatting when we get into those breakouts later on in the webinar. So let's dive in with that first one, how the written application fits into the overall selection process. So as I'm hoping you're aware from what you've seen on the website, but the written application is one of 3 stages of the selection process. It's that first stage deadline, 31st of May at 12 p.m. The written application will be assessed by a panel of shortlisting judges, and these are sector leaders across education, social impact funding, impact and evaluation, and youth voice. And we will be putting all the profiles of the judges as they're confirming. We've got lots of them confirmed already, and they'll be up on our website before the application closes. So you'll be able to have a look at who is reading your submission. The judges will first score your application individually. So they'll individually review your written answers using a score pro forma, a rubric, and assessing each of those criteria. They will then come together in their respective panels to share their scores, identify together who they'd like to bring to panel, and collate their key questions and feedback. And you'll note from, if you've seen the guidance notes, that giving feedback is really important to us, both for successful and unsuccessful applicants. So we offer feedback at every stage. We will prioritise feedback in the first instance for those that are progressing to panel. So they will get it first so that they can utilise that as they move to the next stage. If you're unsuccessful at the written application stage, you will still receive feedback. It will just be a little bit later on in the selection process. They will then meet you, the shortlisting judges will then meet you virtually at the shortlisting panel in July, and will decide whether you come through to the final panel. I won't go into loads of detail on what happens at the panels, as this webinar is very much focused on the written application, but there will be a later webinar in the summer that will take you through preparing for the panels and what to expect when you meet them. I think the key thing that I hope lands from what I've just shared is firstly that skill set. So remember what the judges are bringing together, looking at your application from those lenses that take you through the criteria: impact and evaluation, education leaders, youth voice, social impact funders, but also that they are scoring your applications in the first instance, absolutely. So they're looking just at you, but then the decision about who comes through to panel is also relative. So then they're looking at the kind of makeup of other applicants and assessing you against other applicants and deciding who are the strongest in the pool to come through to present. Some really quick tips before we dive into the criteria in more detail on preparing the written application. So we really recommend that you do an offline copy. The application is on an online platform, Form Assembly, that's linked on the website and in the guidance notes, but for two kind of key reasons, we recommend you do draft it in maybe a Word doc. First is it's just a bit easier to edit and kind of action your changes, but also should anything happen on the day, if you're submitting close to the deadline and you have a challenge with the portal, or anything goes down in terms of your internet and you can't submit, you have an offline copy that you can email to us, and we can kind of take that as confirmation that you'd hit the deadline. You just had a bit of a challenge. So do really recommend having that offline copy. The other quick tip, which I'm sure you're all aware of, is definitely get a pair of eyes that are not yours reviewing your application. Would recommend someone that knows your work and someone that doesn't. ChatGPT, if you're familiar with it, is also a brilliant platform for copy editing and review. And you'll note when you complete the application form, we really encourage that you use ChatGPT. We just ask for transparency. So we will ask you to tick whether you've used AI to help you copy edit and review, and if you've used them as a thought partner in any way. And again, you're not penalized for either of those. It's just for transparency and awareness from our end, to ensure clarity on how you've put together the application. And then the final kind of key tip to just think about is that you'll note that there's a word limit per question. They are quite tight, so we really recommend using the full word count for your answer to give the most fulsome answer possible. People often flag that they've got way more to say than they've been able to capture. So do start a bit early. I think as you redraft, you can get that clarity and maximize the word limit, but keep it within the kind of, I think they're about 200, 250. And then finally, as mentioned in the guidance notes, if providing a written application is a barrier, given accessibility needs, please contact us on that email address, awards@faireducation.org.uk, and we can discuss with you the support available and the options available. So we certainly don't want that to be a barrier to you inputting an application. So I'll pause there for just a second just to see if there's any questions on that kind of overall how the written application fits in and some of those quick top tips before we move on. And either do come off mute, or Jess also says, if you let me know if there's anyone in the chat that's popped a question. I'll just give it a few seconds. Okay, doesn't look like there's any questions yet. Great, so we'll move on then to the next bit. Now, before we dive into the criteria in lots of detail, everything I'm about to kind of share and go into more detail on is really captured in our guidance notes that are linked on our website. And the biggest tip of all is to make sure you have read these before starting your application. So there's a lot of detail in there, but that is the feedback we get consistently from applicants, that actually those guidance notes have been the real anchor in helping them put together their application, because there's lots of great information in there to help you craft it. And I know lots of you have already accessed the guidance notes from our one-to-one chats. I know lots of people have been to the booster and have reviewed our website. So before we get into the criteria together, I'd be really keen to hear from you on what's landed, what you've registered what you think stands out about us and what we're looking for. So in a second, we are going to move into breakouts in pairs for about 7 minutes or so. I'd love you to introduce yourself to your partner, give them a quick one-liner on what your work is or the area that you're focused on. And then I would love you to have a chat about what you know already from looking at either our website or the guidance notes, or if you've just come across us from this very early opening slides, you might have gathered some information. So the 3 questions I'd love you to answer are: how many criteria are there? So what are you writing against? How many criteria are there? What are we looking for? And what are you most concerned about in terms of the written application? Is there any criteria or approach or key questions you have? So, Jess, if I could ask for you to break us out into pairs, and we'll come back in about 7 minutes, and I would love to have some brave volunteers share their reflections. So be ready to share as well. We'll break out now, please. Thanks, Jess. And Jess, if we just pause the recording, then it won't. Awesome. Well, I'm sorry you didn't get a chance to chat with anyone if your room didn't have any people on, but hopefully you had an opportunity to have a little reflection on what you know about our criteria and what we're looking for. Right, welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. I can see everyone dropping back in. Fab. Great. I hope you had a chance to at least meet one other person. Appreciate some rooms didn't have people in initially, so just did a fab job of moving you quickly. So thank you for your patience. But before we crack on, I'd love to hear from you. So inviting a few brave people just to pop off mute. I can't see you all. So if you're willing to share your reflections on these questions of, you know, how many criteria do we have? What are we looking for? And any concerns you chatted about in your group as you approach the written application, would love to hear from you. So I won't call on anyone, even though I do see some familiar faces, but would invite anyone to come off mute to share what they chatted about.
I don't mind going first.
Oh, amazing. Thank you.
So hi, my name's Andreen, and I spoke to Melody, and I will talk about one of the things that we were concerned about, which Melody touched on. It's looking at kind of like previous winners, because obviously it's an innovation award, and we know you're looking for something that's new, but it's the issues in education are not new. We know that what issues are out there. So sometimes it's quite difficult to have a solution that's not already been done. So, for example, last year, the winners were thinking about getting young people into university and supporting that process. And if we have an idea that's similar, how do we show that there's like a USP, or it's really innovative if someone's kind of had that similar idea to yours?
Yeah, that's a great question, Andreen. And I think we think about it being innovative in a few different ways. So I think the first, and we'll chat about this when we go through the criteria in more detail, but I think really relevant to pick up on it now as well, is you're absolutely right. It will, particularly for working in something like higher education, the parameters of your solution are likely to have elements of things that are out there. So what we would be keen to understand is, how are you different and or better in some way from your understanding of what is out there? So in the first instance, we'd want to see that you've done some kind of mapping of what's out there. Our membership is a great starting point. If you are really early stage and you're not really sure, have a look at our members, what they work on, book in for a one-to-one chat. We can definitely signpost you to organizations that you should kind of consider and have on your radar. So that's that kind of first, that market research. Okay, what is out there? What's being offered? And then in that relatively short word limit, thinking about what am I doing that is different in some way or is better? And you can be different and better in lots of different ways. So using that example of higher education, you're absolutely right. I think higher education is probably one of the most crowded spaces, right, in terms of interventions from both the third sector, things that schools are doing, but then there are huge widening participation teams at universities as well. One of our current award winners inside uni works in supporting access to higher education. And what they did really well in the selection process that made them really stand out was hit home their massive USP, which is that they are youth-led. They're created by young people for young people. So they know that they signposted that there's lots of interventions out there that are trying to support young people to access higher education, but actually they draw on a lot of research that indicates peer mentoring and having support from people that are relatable to you or that have just gone through the same process has really impressive impact. And that was what they really hooked onto, that in this crowded space, we stand out because we are a genuinely youth-led initiative. Our content is created, collated, delivered by young people for young people. And that really excited us. So I think that's a really great question. And when we look at the kind of solution criteria in a bit more detail, that's where we are asking you to showcase a bit of that mapping. And as I said, I appreciate when you're early stage, you might not have a full view of the education landscape yet. So do, in the first instance, have a look at our membership. Definitely, if you haven't had a one-to-one, book in for a one-to-one, because that's the kind of stuff we'd love to chat you through and signpost some of the key things we would expect you to be aware of or had a look at to help inform how you can really articulate your solution as unique. So thanks so much, Andreen. That's a great question.
Thank you.
Maybe
Thank
hear
you,
from one more person. Oh my gosh, one more person. If we've got any other reflections, either on what we're looking for, what you're concerned about, or anything about our criteria.
Hi. I was really concerned about the amount of time that this might consume. I work for a charity, and part of my role is fundraising. So it becomes a problem really when you put so much effort and time and then you don't get the award, or I think that's a major concern. And that's why I'm here. I'm trying to see how much effort I'm going to need to put in this.
Yeah, no, it's a very valid concern, Ahmed, and really hear that, right? You're all early stage innovators doing the work, also trying to get funding in. So a couple of things I think that we are conscious of. So the written application, that is why we've got word limit. So there are 6 criteria, but they are short answers that we want you to articulate against those 6 criteria. The panels, it's a long process in that it runs over the summer, July and August, but the preparation for those panels in both instances will be for you to prepare about a 7-minute max presentation that is sort of a mini theory of change. What's your problem? What's your solution? What impact are you looking to have? Who's going to pay for it? Why do you think it might be sustainable? But the majority of that half-an-hour slot on both panels will be questions, Q&A from the panel. But a big piece that is really important to us is that this process is useful for you regardless of the outcome. And we try and do that in 2 ways. So we appreciate it's a big investment of time, right? Doing the written application, preparing for a pitch, potentially 2 pitches if you get through to final. So I mentioned you get feedback at every stage. And we have, in our current cohort of 6 winners, we have 2 winners that had applied previously, were not successful, but really took on the feedback that they received at the different stages, and then it came back to apply and went on to win the award last year. So we do really feel that feedback is really useful. And then the other way we try and make the process really useful, regardless of the outcome, is the fact that we take decision through experts in the sector. And that's both to ensure that it's rigorous, that we're getting the right expertise to choose the best innovations, but also that these are individuals that are really invested, interested, passionate about education innovation, and often want to open doors for applicants regardless of the outcome. So it might be that you don't win, but you have met, say you get to final panel and you've met the CEO of one of the mats that says, okay, they haven't won, but I actually think what they're doing could be really interesting in my school or my trust, and reaches out and you start building a relationship with them. Equally, we have other funders on our panels, both at shortlisting and at final, and it might be a case that we say, okay, in the pool this year you weren't the strongest for the 6, but there have been other funders on the panels that are really excited by what you're doing and think that they could offer some support. So those are kind of the two ways we try and make it a useful investment of time, even if you don't win, is that you get feedback, hopefully can improve your idea, build on it, maybe come back and win with us, but also that we're introducing you. There'll be 12 judges at shortlisting that you'll meet, and at final there will be 8 judges. So there's kind of 20 sector leaders that you will have exposure to across education, social impact funding, impact measurement, and youth voice. So I hope that kind of helps balance what I do appreciate is a big investment of time. Cool. Is there any final questions before we dive into the criteria in a bit more detail? Just do a quick scan.
Teacher, can I just ask something, if that's okay?
Yeah,
quickly?
of course. Yeah, sorry.
Is it still okay at this point, when you're putting in a written application, that you don't have a definitive solution? Is that still a valid thing at this point?
Great question. And again, this will be signposted in the solution criteria, but let's unpick it now. So you will know that we say in our guidance notes, we welcome applicants that are at early stage, idea stage. However, a challenge for judges is that doesn't mean that you don't have parameters of a solution. So we would want you to have some articulation and use the guidance in that solution criteria when I go through it in a bit more detail now to articulate it. If you have various ideas for a solution, I think that's where you really should use your one-to-one application support. So book in for a one-to-one to talk those through and have a bit of back and forth where we can provide some guidance, some recommendations. But absolutely, the written application, you do need to answer every question. And one of the questions is a solution. And we do want to understand what you are thinking of doing. Now, that's not to say that you are held to that. One of our big mantras is be obsessed with the problem, less so the solution. And often the parameters of your solution change quite dramatically through your theory of change process, through the incubation year, as you get to know the problem better, as you get to understand the sector better and what's out there. But we do want to see that you have in mind the kind of key elements of what you think at this stage would work and your rationale for that. And then obviously if that changes through incubation, that's fine. But when we go through the criteria, hopefully that will make it a bit more explicit. Great, thanks. That's a great question. Any other questions before we move on? No. Okay, great, cool. So what we're going to do now is just take each of the criteria in a little bit more detail. This again is nothing that is not in the guidance notes, and you'll also get these slides, but just to kind of bring to light a couple of key tips. So a bit of me talking at you for sort of the next 10 minutes or so max. But as always, I'll pause after each one if there's any kind of questions on that individual criteria. So the first bit of the application opens with the problem. And as I mentioned, our mantra is be obsessed with the problem. So we really want to see that you are attempting to dig deep and are interested in uncovering what you think some of those really root causes of the problem are. When you're articulating the problem, you're encouraged to do that both at scale. So starting with a bit of a funnel approach of like, what does this look like? Why is this a significant problem? In terms of the numbers, in terms of the impact it has on the disadvantaged gap, but then to also kind of funnel in and make it human focused and bring it to life by focusing on the impact on an individual child or parent or carer, whoever the sort of beneficiary of your solution is. And then we're really keen to see that you have done some research, and we welcome both primary and secondary research. So if you're working in something like higher education, there's a huge amount of research out there that you can draw on. But equally, if you're working in an area that's a bit more niche and actually you are drawing on quite a lot of anecdotal evidence from your school or your trust, that is valid too. But it would be great to have a bit of a balance. And if there isn't much data out there, flagging that as a key kind of issue in the problem. And then there are some recommendations on this slide of where you can look to gather that data in terms of kind of national and local data sets, research, both from kind of academics and institutions, and then, oh, it's cut off, sorry, the bottom of the slide there, the kind of grey literature. So there's lots of think tanks and other charities in the education space that produce some great research, great reports that you can draw on to really bring to life the problem. And what we're really looking for in that criteria is that this is a significant problem, so that you're demonstrating that this is a real issue, and also that you have real passion for this problem, that this is something that you think about, you care about, you're motivated to change. And so really bringing that to light. Of course, if you have lived experience of the problem yourself and you feel comfortable about sharing that, you're welcome to bring that experience. That is just as valid as evidence into articulating that issue. Cool. I will pause there just to check if there's any questions on kind of articulating the problem. Nope. All right. Then the next criteria is the solution. And here we first recommend that you kind of divide this answer into sort of two sections. The first is your overview, your kind of quick 1 to 2 sentences that is your elevator pitch. So when the judges read that paragraph, they should be able to, in that first sentence, kind of identify what is your solution in 1 or 2 sentences, and then go into the specifics that define the scope of your solution in a bit more detail. So when, where, how often, who will you deliver to? We do, to that question, that final question, as we've popped here, specificity encouraged. We recognise that this might change through incubation, but at this current point, what are you thinking is the best way to tackle that problem? And then the second kind of part is something, again, that we just discussed, which is in this criteria, trying to really show that you have thought about why this is innovative. So what else is out there? What are other organisations or institutions or the user currently doing? And what's your USP? Why are you different or better? Are you providing a better quality service? Is the time that you're doing it in a different or better approach? Is it more affordable? Are you targeting a particular group that misses out on these types of solutions? So really making that really explicit of why you think your solution is better and different, your USP. Again, I'll just pause there just to see if that's prompted any further questions on the solution. Cool. And then the next criteria asks you to look at what you think the impact of your solution will be. And we recommend that you think about this in kind of 2 ways. So first is try to identify the type of change you are bringing about. Now, the type of change can be across multiple things. You could change someone's skills, someone's attitudes, someone's knowledge, behavior, habits. It might be that you're tackling a few of these, that you're improving skills and knowledge or behaviors and attitudes, but try and be clear on what specific piece your initiative is changing. That's the first bit. And then the next bit that we're also interested in thinking about is tell us about all the changes you think your hypothesis or the hypothesis you have about all the changes that could happen. So what would be that kind of direct impact, but are there any sort of indirect or longer term impacts that you would see as a result of, say, an immediate change in knowledge? Could that lead to improvements in later outcomes for that individual or that young person? So what is the type of change, and think about the time scale of that change, both in the immediate term and the longer term for impact. So problem, solution, impact, that takes you through a sort of mini theory of change and just helps us understand where your thinking is currently at in relation to those 3 key criteria. Then the next one that we have in the application form is sustainability. And this is really thinking about, again, you don't need to have a business plan or a business model defined, but at this stage, why do you think anyone would pay for this? Who is going to pay for this? Is it the user? Is it schools? Is it other funders? Is it the government? And try and show some demonstration of demand. That could be either through conversations you've already had. So you might already know that a couple of schools in your area have been really interested. It could be that you are a teacher and you've been running something in your school and you see that parents are really interested. Bring that demand to life, because that indicates to us proxy for sustainability. Look at other funders if you think you're going to be using kind of grant funding or trust and foundation funding or corporate funding. Have a look at their portfolios of those organizations. Do they fund similar initiatives? Is there something about you or the way that you're doing this work that would be a really good fit with their mandate? Feel free to name them. And then the other kind of key bit that I think is useful to think about in terms of sustainability is, you know, when you're really early stage, a lot of the strategy and delivery is reliant on you, and you're doing kind of the doing as well as the thinking. But we are keen to understand how you think this could potentially scale beyond relying just on you. Again, you're not wed to this, but it's to encourage you to think a bit creatively. So, for example, if we think about one of our current Innovation Award winners, so Stone Soup Group, they were setting up an early years, a more affordable and flexible early years provision in Walthamstow to parents in Walthamstow. And obviously, in the first instance during incubation, that's going to rely heavily on them. But we are interested in ideas that could scale beyond that community. So some of the feedback they'd received at shortlisting was, we get a really great understanding of your problem, solution, impact for Walthamstow and what you're trying to do there, but how could this scale beyond you? It's really reliant on the two of you. And they took that away and they came up with a really cool idea of, you know, once they had some proof of concept and proof of impact, they could support creating a toolkit that they would disseminate to other local authorities and other boroughs, as a means to help other parents and other communities take a community-led approach to early years that would hopefully make it more flexible and affordable. So that kind of toolkit model was something that they embraced during the application process, and it's something that, you know, in the longer term we'll still consider. Similarly, a previous Entrepreneurship Award winner, so Internal Innovation, one of our member award winners, Football Beyond Borders, they ran a really, and are still running, a brilliant program in schools, supporting teachers to process through kind of reflective practice the difficult and challenging experiences they're having in dealing with behavior and other difficult situations in school. That was run in the first instance by Steph, who's one of their therapists and works for FBB. But again, as it scaled, Steph can't be in every single school delivering those sessions. So he thought about lots of different ways that he could support scaling this through different recruitment models for FBB, but also potentially a train-the-trainer model that he worked with schools on. Again, you're not wed to any of these at application stage, but we want to see that you are both thinking about it and are interested in moving beyond it relying sort of on you for the strategy and delivery consistently. So that's that kind of sustainability thinking about who's going to pay for it, demonstrating some demand, and how could this potentially scale beyond relying on you. And we just want to see that you have some ideas and a plan. You don't need a business plan attached or a business model attached to the application in any way. That's sustainability. And then we've got 2 more criteria for entrepreneurs and 3 more for intrapreneurs. Then the next criteria is leadership. And we say that, you know, the incubator and the award is just as much to develop the idea as it is to develop the individual. So it is a leadership development program, and there's lots of opportunities for mentoring from previous award winners. Bloomberg, who funded the award, provide senior leaders from their teams to mentor and support. You also get obviously one-to-ones with the head of innovation at the FEA. And we really want to work with individuals that are excited about this opportunity. We appreciate you're taking on a huge risk to go full-time 6 months on driving this forward, but that you feel really motivated and excited by that. And so we want to understand, what are the skills you think are needed to make your idea a success? What do you have already? How did you build them? Where did they come from? And where are the gaps? No one is superhuman. We're not expecting you to have all the skills needed to develop, test, sustain, and scale an idea, but it's really helpful for us to see your self-awareness of like, this is what I'm bringing, this is what I think I'm really strong in, and these are the areas that I'm less confident in. But I think I could potentially upskill in this way in terms of training or reaching out to others in the network or taking advice from X, Y, and Z organization. We do welcome co-founders, but again, we would be keen to understand how you complement each other and then what your intentions are around the incubator and how that's going to work. And we want you to be really propositional on how you're going to work through the incubator together. You will note that in the guidance notes, we've put a sort of line to help clarify leadership, in that we've said, particularly for member organizations, the lead innovator is likely to be someone who's on track or at middle leadership level. Again, we're using that as a proxy for what we know is really works well in terms of that lead innovator within a member organization, that they've had some time in the organization, they know it well, they've demonstrated both interest and skill at taking on more responsibility, and they're ready for that next step. But again, if you're unsure, definitely book in for a one-to-one and we can chat through in a bit more detail. But we do see this as a great opportunity, not just for leading your innovation, but also leading change for the sector. And we want to give lots of space and voice to you as change makers in the sector. So really looking for people that are excited by that. And then the final criteria is value add. So the first thing we're trying to understand there is, what have you done on your idea till date? It's absolutely fine if you have done some work in terms of running a small pilot, or you've done some focus groups, etc. Do share that. Do share the information if you've got any data to share. Equally, it's absolutely fine if you haven't run a pilot or done any focus groups or testing, but then that will come through on kind of what is the support that you're looking for in this from the incubator. Similarly, in that question, we're keen to understand if you are receiving or are due to receive support from any other organizations, and we see leveraging multiple sources of support as a positive. We're open to it as long as that the need still exists, that we think your idea is really critical, and obviously multiple sources of support therefore are needed. B, that it's not duplicative, that you are getting a useful experience out of both what we're providing and what the other organizations are providing. And then thirdly, that it's not inhibiting your ability to participate in the incubator program. It is a really fun year, but it is an intense year. It starts with those monthly incubator sessions and fortnightly one-to-ones from September to December 24, and then January 2025, the grant kicks in, to June 2025. And in that period, things ramp up. You have fortnightly incubator sessions, fortnightly one-to-ones, monthly mentoring with your Bloomberg mentors. So there's a lot of action, lots of things going on. And we know that people enjoy the year and make the most of it when they have the capacity. And that's why we're paying you for 6 months to kind of have that headspace to really develop, test, sustain, scale the idea, yes, but also to enjoy and get the most out of the program of support. So yeah, we're keen to understand what else you're involved in and how they can hopefully complement and not provide, not strain your bandwidth. And then finally, you'll note in the guidance notes, there's more detail on the curriculum and kind of the principles underpinning how we approach innovation. So we're keen to understand what's attracted you to us. What do you see as the key value that we're bringing? Obviously, we've got lots of elements to the award. There's the grant, there's the incubator program, there's the one-to-one support, there's the peer cohort. So we're keen to understand what for you is particularly pertinent and what are you really excited about in terms of the award. And then there's one more criteria that is not for entrepreneurs, so not for members of the public, only for FEA members. And I realize, sorry, the slide isn't there, but it is organizational commitment. So that is a requirement for member applicants to ensure that they supplement their application with a statement of support from their CEO, signed by their CEO and governance board. That template is in the application, so you don't need to create anything from scratch. You can use our template. And I would highly recommend for FEA members that are applying with an internal innovation that the lead innovator approaches the application and completes the application with their team or a senior member of their team to kind of really get that buy-in process early on. Great, so I will pause there. That's a kind of a bit of a deep dive on the 6/7 for members criteria, just to see if there's any questions before we have a quick look at an example. So I'll just pause there and just, jump off mute or let me know if there's anything in the chat.
Hi, I wanted to ask about how a co-founder might get involved in the incubator.
Yeah, go for it, Lynn.
So is it, I mean, could you both attend all sessions or take turns, or is it sort of, what are the options around that?
Great question. So I think where it's worked, we've got one co-founder model this year, and I think where it's worked best is we normally require that both co-founders join all one-to-ones, because I think it can get a bit confusing if one is coming to some one-to-ones and some to not others. With the incubator, I highly recommend, if you can, that you both come to the theory of change process, so that's September to December. But then after that, we are really happy for you to be quite propositional if you are dividing up responsibilities, to divide up the incubator going forward. So say one of you is focused more on the kind of sustainability piece and sales, they might prioritize those incubator sessions. So yeah, we would just want a bit of a proposal from you, but I think it's worked best when you commit to all one-to-ones together, and then probably the theory of change process is useful if you're both present. Unless another option is if you are co-founders, but one of you is taking very much a kind of lead role, and the other is playing a less intensive role, that could work too. But we'd be open. We just want to be propositional to ensure that you're making the most of it.
And if both are attending, could some of the salary go to the co-founder to share it?
Again, we're open to propositions. We had a job share in one of the cohorts where they split the salary between them. I think that can work. Again, we'd want though to really understand how you're dividing up that 37.5 hours a week, and how who's responsible for what, and how are you kind of contracting and ensuring your ways of working are really clear and explicit, so that you are still making the most out of that kind of 37.5 hours a week that the grant is covering over that 6-month period.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Thanks, Lily. Any other questions on the criteria? Nope. Okay, great. So I'm conscious of time and we don't have a huge amount of time. So I think we will look at the example, but we might not spend loads of time on feedback. So we're going to move again into small groups. And Jess is really kindly going to pop into the chat the link to the slides, because that will take you to a previous entry where there's an example of a problem, answer to the problem criteria, and then the solution criteria. Please note that these are sample answers. They are taken from a real previous award winner who's kindly consented to their answers being shared to help prospective applicants. But treat them as examples, not necessarily model answers. There are many good aspects to the answers, but as is always the case, there are areas where they can be improved. And what I would love you to do when we break out now, we'll just do maybe a 5-minute chat, is for you to have a read through, chat with your group on what you think works really well about the problem and the solution answers, and any bits from what you've heard from going through the criteria that you think the answers could have been improved on. So we'll break out just for 5 minutes, given conscious of time, and then we'll come back together in 5 minutes. And Jess, if you could kindly pop the link in the chat so people have access to the slides and can have a look at those answers. Perfect. Thanks, Jess. Hopefully it should pull you shortly into sort of 3 small groups-ish. And if we just pause the recording, Jess, what people are in their little... They should be back in a few seconds. Yeah. Hey everyone. Welcome back. I appreciate that was a bit shorter. So you might not have been able to chat through both answers, but would love to just hear some reflections on what you thought worked well. Let's start with the problem. I've stopped sharing because we've all got the slides. It's much easier for me to see you all then. But anything you thought worked well in either of the answers, and anything from kind of going through the criteria you would add or do slightly differently. And would love to hear, what your group's chatted about.
There was a claim about ADD and dyslexia, which stood out to me as not being backed up and being rather a suspect claim.
Yeah, exactly. So that answer has got some great references, but you're absolutely right. There are some quite critical points made there, linking the issue of food insecurity to what we're really interested in, which is closing that disadvantage gap, and really focusing on young people that are experiencing disadvantage in different ways. And you're right, that is missing a kind of critical reference. So yeah, that's fab, Leonie. Like, thinking about when you're making big claims, try and ensure that you've got your references in there. Brill, thank you. Anything else anyone would draw on for either of the answers? Andre?
I liked the fact that they were linking it to real life problems. So they had a case study in Sam, the 7-year-old boy.
Yeah.
And then they had lots of data. I'm not sure whether it's kind of correct data or factual, but they had lots of data with the 3 million. So you could see they'd done their research on the problem that they were trying to solve.
Yeah, you can see that they were really trying to embrace the structure that we recommend, right? Which is start big, show that this is a big problem, or this is an important problem, and they've gone for scale to articulate that as a critical problem in the first instance. They've started big, and then they've really honed in on what this looks like at an individual level and how this affects an individual child. So that they've tried to mirror some of the recommendations around the structure. Brill, thanks, Andre. And then what about the solution? Was there anything in the kind of solution answers that we liked, or bits that we would want to change, make better, improve?
I liked how it was really clear how they were doing things on a small scale, and then breaking it down into the standalone workshop, the 6 weeks, the 12 weeks, the yearly courses, and then how it could be rolled out to add even more value as well.
Yeah. So what I thought is really strong about this answer is you're absolutely right. They've again followed that structure. Like, you get a really quick snapshot of what they're trying to do, right? Free interactive after school cooking clubs. And then they go into quite a lot of detail on the parameters of their solution and what they're thinking about in terms of standalone and how the 6-week and 12-week courses can work. But I think in doing a lot of that detail, they have missed something quite critical in this answer. And I think they've kind of moved into sustainability a bit here. And there was a kind of key bit that we would love to come out a bit more explicitly in solution. Does anybody remember what that kind of other parameter that we would love for them to try and showcase here?
Was it to do with any other funding?
Sorry, Michelle, I missed what you said.
Was that any other funding to be able to support it?
So that would come into sustainability, like who else is going to pay for it, what other funders might be interested. So I think that's in a slightly later criteria. But what here they've done it's a quick elevator pitch. We get what they're doing in a couple of sentences. They've detailed the parameters of that elevator pitch in a lot of detail. It's going to impact knowledge, opportunity, confidence. It's going to have standalone 6 week, 12 weeks. It's going to be for parents and carers and kids. But there is something here that I would love to understand in a bit more detail that they haven't quite
What sets them apart?
articulated. Yeah, what sets them apart? Yeah, a bit of that kind of market mapping. What else is out there? Derek, go for it.
Sustainability. How are you going to roll it out and make it sustainable? Because one of the issues is it's free funding. So how are you going to keep the funding coming?
Yeah, so in that, I think that could come in the sustainability, the question, where the criteria around sustainability, definitely. And I think here, when they've talked about kind of feeder schools, could incorporate a further community element, that could be some of the bits that they articulate in sustainability, and what they could have used some of this word count for in a bit more, that could be more compelling for solution, is what is their USP. So they could have talked maybe a bit more about maybe that parent student kind of element and how powerful that could be. They could have articulated what else is out there. Like, we know, like Magic Breakfast, one of our members, one of our scaling winners, does a huge amount around food insecurity. Who are the other big players in this sector? Why are they better, different? How are they learning from them, working with them potentially? So again, just a bit of that market mapping. It could be a case that they say there are no cooking clubs out there for parents in schools, and we're completely new. Or we know that there are other initiatives that support food insecurity, like Magic Breakfast, etc., government schemes, but we are different because ours is really about being community-led. It's space for parents not only to build culinary skills, but also build relationships with the school, and really kind of hone in on that kind of asset-based community development piece that I think is at the heart of what they're trying to do as well. I'm conscious that we are 4 minutes over, so really appreciate you all staying on a bit longer, and we will wrap up there. So I just want to say a huge thank you for coming along. We will share the slides and the recording as mentioned. If you haven't had a one-to-one, please do book in for a one-to-one. If you've had a one-to-one, you are welcome to have another one-to-one once you have a look at the application form. But we really recommend use that second one-to-one really intentionally. So come with a very sort of, and submit that to Sosik before your chat, a clear question around the criteria. If you've already had a kind of general chat about the award and you're now looking at the criteria in a bit more detail. There'll also be some more webinars coming up in the summer. There'll be one for teacherpreneurs, and then there'll be one about preparing for panels and what happens at panels and how you can best prepare for the shortlisting and then the final pitches. So that's, I think I'll wrap us up there. If there's any burning questions, do pop them in the chat, and I'm very happy to stay on myself and answer them. But for everyone else, if you need to drop off for other meetings or other commitments, thanks so much for coming and best of luck. It's literally the best bit of the job, getting to read all your amazing ideas. So thank you for the time that you're going to put in if you apply. Have a lovely rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone.
Thank you.
And I'm very happy to stay on if anybody has a burning question that they'd like to just ask me. But otherwise,